Burning questions.
Insightful answers.
Listener's choice.
With Clement Manyathela.
So on our Listener's Choice feature this morning, we are actually doing a follow-up to the conversation we had on the 702 open line last week, following that Constitutional Court ruling that couples married under customary law are married in community of property and cannot enter into anti-nuptial contract at a later stage, even if they subsequently enter into a civil marriage, unless, of course, they do it through the right court processes. So when we were having that discussion, we got an email from one of you that said, okay, I hear you, but how do I then dissolve a customary law marriage? How do I dissolve a customary law marriage? So what we've done is bring in an expert who can guide us through this conversation and help us understand what processes to follow if you want to dissolve a customary marriage. And of course, it's an important discussion to have, because when relationships break down, many people assume that separation, family discussions, or some traditional processes are enough to bring a customary marriage to an end. But in reality, the law tells a completely different story. I mean, in this country, a customary marriage carries full legal status, and ending it requires a formal court-issued divorce, just like a civil marriage. And I think this lack of clarity has actually led to some really serious consequences for many people, because that's why we see disputes over property and inheritance. We see complications when trying to remarry, but actually you have not dissolved the last customary marriage. People, when they want access to maintenance or resolve issues involving children, I mean, in some cases, individuals only discover years later that they are still legally married, despite having long moved on with their lives. So, have you been able to dissolve a customary marriage before? What challenges have you faced? And what questions do you have for my guest this morning around dissolving customary marriages? You can call us on 011-883-0702. WhatsApp's on 072-702-1702. Mary-Jane Mphahlele is an attorney at Mary-Jane Mphahlele Attorneys, who's going to guide us through this conversation. Mary-Jane, hi. Good morning.
Morning, Clement, and your listeners. Thank you so much for having me.
So how does South African law define and recognize a customary marriage? It's almost like we needed all these important judgments from the lower all the way to the highest court in the land to once again remind us of the legal weight that customary marriages also hold.
In South Africa, the law recognizes customary marriages through the Recognition of Customary Marriages Act. In simple terms, and this is in terms of Section 3 of the said Act, a customary marriage would be deemed to exist if, both parties have complied with the three requirements, having been over the age of 18 and consented to get married in terms of customary law, and the marriage must be negotiated, entered into, or celebrated in terms of their respective customs and customary law. Okay. I emphasize the celebrated because people think if they've done the important customs and they have not celebrated, they think they're not married. Whereas the Act says all celebrated.
We had this debate on the open line last week on the show, Mary-Jane, about how do you even define a celebration. So, because to me, a celebration could be that, okay, we've just paid lobola, we've baked our cakes, and the two families are sitting and they're having tea, or they're cheers with just like a bottle of bubbles, and it's not a big umsebenzi. So how do you then define what a celebration is?
It would depend from case to case, because as much as we can say a celebration is a big wedding or a big ceremony, not everyone can afford that.
Yes.
So what would be a celebration for me as someone who, earns this much, or someone who has this access to this economic power, or is of a certain social standing? The court would have to get the evidence based on those things. We can't really say that sharing a meal, it's merely celebration, or having a big wedding, it's celebration. It has to be determined on a case-to-case basis.
So on a case-to-case basis. Okay, get it. Okay, so now, how do you then dissolve a customary marriage? I'm sure you have dealt with cases, or seen from your observation, Mary-Jane, how many people struggle later in life because they thought, I've just paid lobola for that person. And even long after they're no longer with them and they've moved on, when they're trying to remarry, and then they're realizing that, hi, there's a blockage. And that's because they never attended to that customary marriage. So for people who want to dissolve it, what's the process to follow? Because people think, it's just sitting down with the families and explaining that, we're no longer together, then go our separate ways.
Unfortunately, for most people, they think that merely just separating that ends the marriage. Merely saying that I don't want you, you don't want me, that separates, dissolves the marriage. Or calling the uncles to come together and say, it's not working, then that, dissolves the marriage. Unfortunately, that's not the case. The Act in itself says in Section 8 that a customary marriage may only be dissolved by a court by a decree of divorce on the grounds of irretrievable breakdown of the marriage. So only a court of law can dissolve a valid customary marriage that complies with all those requirements we spoke about earlier.
And do you follow the right process, like when you would divorce in a civil marriage?
Absolutely. You issue summonses. They are served on the other party through the sheriff, and that person would have 10 days to respond to the summonses. If they do respond, then they will have an additional 20 days to, put their formal response onto the summons. And if they do not respond within the first 10 days after being served, then you can proceed to divorce them in default.
Yeah, this is really going to help a lot of people because, as I said, for some reason and for some bizarre reason, we take customary marriage as it's just the first step, or some people take it even as engagement, and they don't realize that once you've passed that process, your main wedding is not some civil union, you've already had a wedding. And if you choose to have, a ceremony where you're going to wear a white wedding, sure, go ahead. But that doesn't in any way give it more importance than the first step that's already taken, especially if it's done according to how you have defined it. I want listeners to have an opportunity to ask you some questions and also share their own experiences if they've had to dissolve a customary marriage. Give us a call on 011-883-0702. The WhatsApp line is 072-702-1702. Let's start with your WhatsApps.
Good morning, Clement. Look, just a bit of clarity. My aunt got married and had 3 kids with her husband. Customary marriage because they only paid lobola. And then they got married for about 19 years and had 3 kids with her husband. And he left after 19 years to marry somebody else. And they had a court marriage. And after that, many years later, about 10 years or so later, this previous wife wants to go to court to make sure that they are legally divorced. And when she gets to court, she found out that before he married her, he had already paid lobola for the now wife, and she was never, so I don't know, could we say she was never the wife to begin with? Or how is that dealt with in terms of law?
Sure, Mary-Jane, I'm a bit lost there. Did you get it, or should I play that again?
Yes, I did.
You got it?
Get it.
Okay, perfect.
Yes. So, not legal advice, just, providing some input on the situation. It seems that the uncle married the now civil wife first, the customary, because he paid lobola for her first, and then thereafter paid lobola for the wife who thought they were the first wife, and then thereafter married the actual first wife in terms of civil.
Yes.
I get it. So in this situation, it means that there exists a polygamous marriage in terms of the first wife, who is now the second, the civil wife, and then in between her and the second wife, who's now trying to divorce, right? The Act does allow for a polygamous marriage. However, there needs to be compliance in terms of Section 6, subsection 6, that says that if a man wants to take the second wife, they need to do an application to the court that will regulate the matrimonial regime. So, of course, the polygamous marriage would have to comply with the respective parties' customs. In some cultures, you can't take the second wife without the consent of the, you can't take the second wife without the consent of the first wife. But if in your culture is allowed, then we have to look at now if there would be a joint estate. Section 6, subsection 6 would tell us that if there wasn't that application that I spoke about earlier, then there wouldn't be a joint estate. That means the first marriage would be in community of property, the second marriage would be out of community of property. However, you can't enter into a civil marriage whereas there is a subsisting customary marriage.
Unless you are polygamous.
Polygamy, you can only do it in terms of customary marriage. You can't do it
only in terms. Yes.
And what's more prevailing now is that people don't dissolve their customary marriages and then they go enter into civil marriages with other people. That civil marriage can be invalidated because the Act does not allow you to marry in terms of the Marriages Act when there is a subsisting customary marriage. Yeah,
and that's why a lot of people really find trouble, down the road, or when someone has passed, and now someone who married that person 20 years ago wants to bury them because the law says I got married to that person customarily, and you entered into a civil marriage, so our marriage still is valid. Nhlanhla, you're calling us from Linwood. You've got a question. Good morning.
Good morning.
Sure.
It's exactly on the issue of married customarily first, then I went on to marry on the next lady in a civil marriage. Now, the first lady just indicated to me, go ahead and get married. I'm not married to you. Our marriage is over.
So that's what your first lady you got married to customarily said to you.
Yes, we are not married anymore. I've moved on with my life. Move on with your life.
And you went and found another lady who you married in a civil way or customarily?
In a civil way.
In a civil way. But did you not pay lobola for them before the civil?
No, I paid lobola because in our culture we pay lobola before you can get married.
Yes, but then that's customarily. Then you are married at the point you've paid lobola and you've celebrated.
Yeah, so I married the first one. We celebrated.
Yeah.
We went our separate ways, and I went and found another one and paid lobola. We went to Home Affairs. We signed. Okay,
so you want to know if you're still married to that first one?
I want to know at what point do we then nullify it, because the first lady said it's nullified. She does not want that marriage. Yeah.
Yeah, but she also said it. Hey, so Mary-Jane,
she said it.
How would you advise Nhlanhla? Because the lady just said, we're no longer together, but it hasn't been nullified according to the processes you've explained.
Yeah.
So, firstly, before you get to nullifying a marriage, we have to determine as to whether there are grounds to nullify that marriage. But if you have complied with Section 3 in respect of the first marriage, then you are married in terms of customary. If you want to dissolve that marriage, you simply divorce. And you cannot marry someone in terms of civil, whereas there is an existing customary marriage with someone else. You can convert the first marriage into a civil marriage with your first spouse, but you can't simply marry someone else in terms of civil without having dealt with, the customary marriage. So the grounds for nullifying would be lack of legal capacity to marry, absence of genuine consent, and maybe prohibited degrees of relationship. Maybe you are married to your sibling and you didn't know, or blood relative. Then those are the things that we consider.
What if I've fallen out of love, Mary-Jane?
You'd simply divorce.
Oh, you simply divorce, okay. Oh, then nullifying, that's completely separate to the divorce. Yeah, okay. So, Nhlanhla, does that make sense? So, I think you're going to have to call that first lady, brother.
No, let me ask the last question.
Quickly, yeah.
Yeah. Now, what is the status of my marriage now? Of my second marriage?
You would have to consult with an attorney properly on that, but based on case law and the legislation, if you are married in terms of customary law, we are going to assume for all purposes that the first marriage is a valid customary marriage.
Okay.
You cannot marry the second person in terms of civil, in terms of the Marriages Act. That's not allowed.
Yeah. So, Nhlanhla, to avoid problems, my brother, for your new wife, call the old lady and sort it out legally so that you nullify it or you divorce to allow for your new marriage to be valid. You don't want problems.
Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Thank
brother.
you very much.
All the best.
Bye.
Thanks, Nhlanhla, calling us from Linwood.
Hi, Clement. Can you please ask your guest then that if I've sent my people to another province, say I send them from Northwest to KZN, and my people, they negotiated Lobola and they paid Lobola on that day, and then they have lunch there, and then they come back to the Northwest. Okay? It's not like they're coming with Makoti and all that. It all ended there. Okay? So now, fast forward down the line, you want to get into a civil marriage with someone else because now that customary marriage didn't work between the two people. And now you get another partner, spend some time, you want to get into a civil marriage with that partner. Apparently, you have to divorce this first partner from the customary marriage. And now, what is the process there? Please, can you just explain what is the process there?
Okay. Yeah, Mary-Jane, you sort of explained what you do, but the best thing is speak to an attorney and they'll tell you what the necessary steps are. Or can you just go to a court yourself and do it yourself?
When it comes to customary marriages, I always say the best thing to do is consult with an attorney to find first if there is a valid customary marriage. Because as much as it's an assumption and also a well-known assumption that once lobola is paid, there's a customary marriage. There are other requirements that need to be met. And in most cases, yes, they are met, but we can't really just put a blanket over everything. So the first thing, consult with an attorney to determine if there's a valid customary marriage. Or if you strongly believe there is, you can do the divorce yourself. You don't need an attorney.
Yes, okay.
To, do the divorce. Okay. You simply go to your regional court, you ask them for the template, you fill it in, you provide the necessary information, and you give them the documents. Where they are minor children, you give them the birth certificate, you attach the lobola letter if you have. If you don't, you get affidavits from the witnesses who were there to attest as to what happened, to a point where you think there's a customary marriage or a customary marriage was concluded.
Okay.
You issue those, they are allocated a unique case number, you take them to the sheriff, you pay a certain fee, they serve the other party will have those time frames to respond.
Okay, perfect. Tammy, you are in Alberton. Hi. Hey, Tammy.
Hello.
Sure, Tammy, go ahead.
I'm having the same situation here. So now, as the lady was speaking, my question tend to be like, what validate the customary marriage exactly? Because my situation is very, very complicated. I'm not even sure that I'm married in that customary marriage. Is it existing? I'm not.
Did you
even
pay
sure.
lobola, Tammy? In Tlaula?
I didn't pay. Yes, actually, it was my firstborn. I was getting my firstborn to this lady, and then I said to her, "No, I'm young. I'm not ready for marriage." And then she said, "No, she can't be pregnant because she's a Christian. So now I must lobola her." I said, "No, I cannot lobola her. But according to my culture, I must pay damages because I've made damages to the. Even though she had 2 babies already." But I believe that I still have to just pay damages to cut the matter short, yes. But however, I'm not sure if it's valid because what transpired after I pop out the money to pay damages, apparently she asked me that she's going to add money so that she can ask her family that she's going to stay with me since she's going to have a little baby. So I'm not sure, or did she add the money and what? Because when we went there, apparently, I don't know to call the area. In fact, when we went there, apparently we were just invited to the church after that.
Yo.
And then the lady bought the rings and stuff like that. So, yeah.
Wait,
so
were you there? You went to the church?
Yes.
Did you put a ring on her finger?
She did put a ring. We were shocked with my family, of which when we fight after that, they didn't work, and then she took a ring. Okay, I said, "Oh, it's your ring. If this thing is not working, it's your ring. I'm giving you back. You can take it." So
yeah, that's very complicated.
Very complicated.
Okay, Mary-Jane, yeah, that's complicated because Tammy went there to pay intlaulo, so what they call damages, right? Because you've impregnated their child before they could get married. But this woman seems to have added money so that the family can look at it like as, okay, uyamthatha, so they can live together. And then they went to church, they were invited to church, and she brought out a ring. So what does Tammy do in this case? I mean, could that woman argue that, well, we are customarily married, or they would have to go check once again the conditions of those negotiations to see if that is valid as customary marriage?
So there's a lot at play. But if that money and when they went to pay damages and all those things that happened there comply with Section 3, if the money that was paid there, some of it was for lobola and both parties, were of the same mind, then we can say there is a valid customary marriage. It would be important for him to properly sit down with an attorney and, get properly advised. That if there is compliance in terms of Section 3, one would say there is a valid customary marriage. And then in terms of what happened at church, I believe there's a lot that's missing there that we are not privy to.
Yeah.
But in South Africa, yes, you can marry through a church, and the marriage must be officiated by a marriage officer registered with the Department of Home Affairs. So if that happened, then banyeti. But if not, it's another conversation.
Yo.
But the proper way to know his position, it would be to just properly consult with an attorney.
Okay. Hey, Mary-Jane Mphahlele, thank you so much. We may have to bring you back because there's just too many calls and too many WhatsApps we haven't even gotten to. She's an attorney at Mary-Jane Mphahlele Attorneys. It's 11:32.